And now that we've taken care of a little bit of business, we are ready for our very first guest, someone that I am very fortunate to have on show. Just doing some great things across the board. We have Miss Tiffany Jordan. Tiffany, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, Andrew. How are you?
Hey, doing great, doing great. For our viewers, give our viewers a little bit of a point of reference, where you're from, a little bit, of course, about that educational background and your professional experience.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Roanoke, Virginia, and moved back home about 2.5 years ago. This August, it'll be 3 years. And I'm a proud Demon Deacon, as Andrew is as well. And so that was where I was fortunate enough to meet him and really kind of see the great work that he's doing on campus, even as an alum. And he's inspired me to be more active in my alumni hood. And so I want to thank him for that. It's been a great journey so far. I'm an educator by training. I joined Teach for America and taught in Charlotte for a little while. I have a master's from Cornell in public administration, where I focused on human rights and social justice. Have a little bit of policy background, worked for President Obama's education policy team, worked on the Hill in education policy and healthcare, criminal justice reform. Worked in diversity and inclusion, and now I am back home in Roanoke working at Virginia Tech around college access with the TRIO department. More specifically, I'm the director of their talent search program.
Wow. Wow. I'm going to pause you right there. Let me catch my breath. You are doing a lot and covering a lot of ground regarding being a public servant, public advocacy, education, a whole lot of key and really necessary, I'll say, areas of concern. So you have this wide range of experience. Walk through with our viewers that pivot. What was the draw based on where you've been? What was the draw for you to go ahead and go back to where it started in Roanoke, Virginia?
Wow, that's a great question, Andrew. And people always ask me that, like, you were living in DC and decided to move back home to Roanoke. Why? And I always tell them that it wasn't my decision, it was a God decision. I was living in DC and working on Capitol Hill, enjoying my life, going to brunch on Sundays and just kind of living in this big city. And I was on Facebook one day and saw this article that talked about Roanoke having one of the highest rates of generational poverty in the nation. My hometown, what I think is a smaller city, having one of the highest rates of generational poverty in the nation. It's not Chicago, it's not Philadelphia, it's not a big city. And so it really hit me like a ton of bricks, and it stuck with me that my hometown was dealing with this issue. And so that was when I started to kind of toy with the idea of moving back home and trying to impact change. And so since I've been home, I realized why I was brought home. It has not been easy at all the time, but I know that it's necessary work. So that it was really by happenstance. I know I was supposed to see that article to bring me back home. And so it's definitely a issue of concern. And I can definitely see the generational poverty, and Roanoke is one of the most segregated cities in the South. And so a lot of things go into poverty: segregation, access to education, quality education, access to jobs. How are people who are being released from incarceration are being treated and acclimated back into society? And so those are all the things that we are dealing with here in Roanoke, and things that we're trying to tackle: gun violence. All of those things go in together to decrease that generational poverty. And so we're starting to have really meaningful conversations about how we can find solutions to it. And so it's been really great to be back home as an adult after I've kind of gone off and worked in different realms, to come back and bring my experience and what I like to think of sometimes as my expertise to try to tackle those issues here in Roanoke.
And that's real important, because when you say, you say the generational poverty, there's so many different elements under that umbrella. You talked and touched base on them, ranging from whether it's education access. We talk about food equity and food deficits. There's a number of little moving parts, and I think when you were walking through that, that's not that's just giving all of our viewers awareness. Not only is this a situation going on in Roanoke, but obviously it's like you said before, it's not just a big city issue. People think, well, this happens in New York or Chicago, and people wouldn't think, but that's even more important to have the dialogue and conversation. Walk through some of the coalition building you've been able to do, and it's not just you, it's other, I'll use the term young professionals, but y'all are professionals. Like y'all are professionals. Walk through some of the coalition building you and your other colleagues are able to do to continue these conversations, to start developing that platform for change.
Yeah, so first I'll say, no matter where you are, you have to find your people. And your people who speak the same language as you, because you have to, we're all in this fight for freedom together, right? And so coming back home in 2017, at first it felt like I was speaking a different language, literally. I was talking about, education and how property taxes fund education. And if you live in a place where you don't have $250,000 houses or something like that, then, though the money from those property taxes go into those schools. And we have schools here in Roanoke that are lacking resources because of that. I got a lot of flack because of that. I got a lot of people who, were very powerful in the city saying, that's not the way that it is. Like, you need to be quiet about this. You don't know what you're talking about. Which was hard for me because I respected a lot of those people. But the other part was that I worked in education policy. So I know the way in which education works. And so I started to doubt myself, which was crazy. But then I started to meet people who I like to say spoke my language. And it was just kind of like okay, I'm not crazy, right? And there are pockets of people in this city who understand, who are ready to have those real conversations and not just have this blanket statement of, well, Roanoke's an all-American city, and I put that in quotation marks, because we have to really tackle some real issues. So the millennials of Roanoke City who have come back, who are natives, the new people who have come for their jobs or for education, we have really been able to come together and find one another in areas like Black Girls Brunch, which is a organization I started, Black Girls Brunch Roanoke organization I started, where we can network with other women of color through things like our jobs and professional networks and things like that. And so that is how we're like, okay, you're interested in poverty and alleviating poverty, and so am I, right? And so what are you doing? Oh, you're a teacher? Okay, let me come in and speak to some of your students about college access. Oh, you're a doctor? Oh, you're a nurse? Oh, let's start to talk about how food injustice actually impacts the way that students are able to learn, and the lack of access to fresh food and vegetables in neighborhoods, and how that's perpetuated mostly in low-income areas. And that's where we see poverty, that's where we see health issues, that's where we see schools that may be low performing. And so then really building our social capital, right? Getting in front of the mayor, getting in front of the vice mayor, getting in front of city council, working on campaigns to make sure that these issues are issues that are at the forefront of the people who are about to be making decisions for our city, as well as for our school board. And so it really kind of happened organically. I didn't seek people out. We didn't all message each other in 2016, 2017 and say, okay, we're going to move back home to Roanoke. Different circumstances all brought us here to Roanoke, and then we have just learned how to work together with one another because we all have similar passions to make sure that we are making the city better.
And it's funny that you say that, because what you just said, it comes back to something that is ringing in my head, that what you do is preparing you for where you are going to be. And when I think back to some of the things you shared about your your previous professional experience. Now all you're doing is bringing the best of what you've done, what you've been trained in, and you're having those conversations that clearly people want to have. Some people might want to stifle them, and they're stifling them for a reason, I guess, or trying to. But bigger than that is you're speaking to facts, you're speaking to areas of concern, you're speaking to narratives that far too often have been overlooked, and those voices count. That input counts. And just listening to the coalition building you're able to do, now you're getting more people in tune, invested, and asking, now that we're here, where do we go, and what things do we need to bring with us? What things do we need to leave alone? What resources do we need to seek out? Now, share with our viewers, obviously you're running like 25 hours, 8 days a week. That must be one of those young professional things. I don't know how y'all do it, but
lots of coffee.
Lots of coffee. Okay, we're just going to keep it there. Lots of coffee. But I know on the horizon, and we're going to have these showing during the commercial break, but I want you to speak to 2 events that are coming up that definitely tie in with that larger umbrella of chipping away of that generational poverty piece.
Absolutely. So I spoke briefly about working on campaigns and getting involved in civically, right, and using our right that people died for, quite frankly, in order for us to use. And so I am helping, and I'm hosting an event for a man who I really trust and believe in and think would be great for our city council. His name is Robert Jeffrey Jr., and he is having an event next Thursday, March 5th, at the Roanoke Country Club. And that is an event that we want everybody to come out to. He is running on a Democratic ticket, and just hear that's a launch party for him. And so just hear his platform, some of the things that he's passionate about, what he wants to do in the city. What I love about Robert is that he's intentional about the work that he wants to do and see in this city. And so that is next Thursday, March 5th, and I believe that's at 7 p.m. But like Andrew said, that flyer will be on as soon as this segment goes off. And then tomorrow, my good friend John Lewis, who is just so passionate about food and justice in Northwest Roanoke, which is where we're both from, which has a high amount of, most of Northwest Roanoke is a food desert. And he is trying to do a Northwest food assessment about how we can bring fresh fruit and vegetables into Northwest Roanoke, because we know that it's linked to health, because we know that it's linked to poverty, because we know that it's linked to education. And so that's tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the Gainesboro Library, the historic Gainesboro Library. And so make sure to tune into that. I also want to give a quick shout out to Trish White Boyd, who's also running for city council. Her launch is tomorrow at the Melrose Public Library at noon. And so please make sure that you attend that as well. She's also running the Democratic ticket. I also believe and trust in her work. And then we also have a kids farmers market tomorrow starting at 3 o'clock at Williamson Road Library. Speaking of food and justice, this will be our second one. It's hosted by Feeding America Southwest and Roanoke City Libraries. And so those are some of the things that are happening. If you're a young professional in Roanoke, a young Black professional, but just a young professional in general, the Urban Professional League is having their award ceremony to recognize people who are doing work in the community tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. I believe that's at the Fitzpatrick Hall at the Jefferson Center. They're going to be honoring Trifecta, who does wonderful work in the community, and also Jordan Bale, who also does wonderful work in the community. And they're both millennials as well. So yeah, doing some really great work here. I'm proud of my colleagues. I'm proud of my generation for stepping up, for coming back home when the narrative has always been to us, don't come back home to Roanoke, there's nothing for you here. And so we're trying to change that narrative. We're trying to make it a better place for generations to come. and so that Roanoke can keep growing. And so I just really appreciate my colleagues, and I really appreciate you for having me on, Andrew.
Well, I tell you what, this is part of what we do on the show, and anyone that is making a genuine effort to be proactive when it comes to community advocacy, and we have people across the board, but anytime it's something dealing with community advocacy, whether where we are here in Atlanta, where you are in Roanoke, there are stories to be told, there are narratives to be written, there are narratives to be rewritten. And one of the things you said earlier, which I think speaks volumes to you and your peers and other professionals, when you said there's no reason to come back. And just the fact that y'all are doing the coalition building and things of that nature, you're providing reasons to come back. So what we're going to do is, at this point in time, before we go to our commercial break, thank you for taking time out of your schedule. Thank you for leading by example. And thank you indirectly for challenging all of us to take inventory of what's going on and ask ourselves what we can do. So Tiffany, thanks a lot for like I said, always good seeing you, and thank you so much for taking and making the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Okay, you are welcome. So what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to our commercial break, and during the break, we're going to have that information regarding those events taking place in Roanoke. Again, we are tuned in to the Conversation Corner, Status Network, the live TV channel, and let's go ahead and go to that commercial break.